Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third session of the Open GLAM webinar series. This series is organized by the Memory of the World Committee of the Asia and Pacific, by UNESCO Bangkok and the Creative Commons. The objectives of this webinar series is to introduce the basics and benefits of open access policies and the principles, basics of copyright and open access licenses and tools, share good practices and lessons learned, and support the development of open access policy at your institution. You can check the chat box for a link to download the roadmap and other resources that would be shared. Today, we are discussing open access cases and good practices with our speakers, Douglas McCarthy from Europeana, Ivy Lee from the National Library Board, Singapore, and Yvonne Christiani from Wikimedia Indonesia. Please join me in welcoming all of them to this series, to this session. But before we move any further, I'd like to remind you of some housekeeping rules. Please ensure that your microphone and video are disabled. I should also remind you that this webinar is being recorded. Please pose your questions using the Q&A function or just submit them into the chat box at any time during the session, and we will collect all the questions and the speakers will respond to them during the Q&A session. So we'll get started. How are other GLAM institutions digitizing their collections and doing open access? What lessons can be learned from those experiences? This session will introduce a global picture of the GLAM digitization and open access policy, the practice and policy, and we'll focus on case studies and experiences from the Asia Pacific region. Our first speaker today is Douglas McCarthy. Douglas is the Collections Engagement Manager at Europeana and lives in the Netherlands. He's an active member of the Open GLAM community and has researched and written about open access to digital cultural heritage extensively. Since 2018, Douglas has co-led a global survey of Open GLAM with Dr. Andrea Wallace. He's also the co-founder and editor of the Open GLAM publication, which you can find on Medium. Douglas will present the latest global landscape of open access to cultural heritage. He will highlight key trends and recent developments and share practical advice on navigating the Open GLAM resources. So over to you, Douglas.
Thank you, Madhavi, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm now sharing my screen, and I hope that you can, in a moment, see my first slide, full screen. So first of all, thank you very much to our hosts, everyone involved in making this session happening. I'm really looking forward to it. And over the next 5 or 7 minutes, I'd like to share with you a brief introduction to a quite complex piece of research work which I've been involved in for the past almost 3 years. So this is an introduction to what we call the Open GLAM survey. And this slide deck will be shared in the chat immediately after I finish. So anything that you see here can be referenced and linked and shared later. So what is the Open GLAM survey? The Open GLAM survey started in spring 2018, and it examines how GLAMs, so galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, make open access data, whether digital objects, metadata, or text, available for reuse. And it's led and founded by Dr. Andrea Wallace, who's Senior Lecturer in Law at the University of Exeter in the UK, and myself. So why did we start the survey? First of all, we wanted to address an information gap in the field that we saw. There was a lack of comprehensive and up-to-date information about open access in the GLAM sector. There was no shared place to see or add relevant data, and there was a perceived Anglophone and Western bias in Open GLAM. So Andrea and I were really motivated to discover and share the latest global picture. So we developed a resource for GLAM people, GLAM professionals who want to explore open access policy and practice, and also people who just want to find and use open content or data from GLAMs. The survey method is really agile, organic and crowdsourced. We started off gathering information via desk research and outreach to the global GLAM community, who've been a huge part of its growth. And anyone can suggest survey additions or corrections by getting in touch with Andrea or myself, or completing a Google form, which is linked in the survey. Since we began with a very small data set back in March 2018 with about 30 GLAMs, the survey coverage has grown exponentially, and it's now, speaking today, 858 GLAM open access examples are listed in the survey. So let's just define open so we have a shared understanding. For the purposes of the survey, we follow the open definition, which is developed by Open Knowledge International and is linked here. And in short, this means open is something that anyone can freely access, use, modify, and share for any purpose. So it's quite a wide-ranging and liberal definition of open. And when we come to specific licenses and rights statements which conform to the open definition, these are the main ones. We have the public domain mark, the CC0 tool, the attribution and the share-alike Creative Commons license, and a couple of versions of no known copyright. There's the rights statement one, and also the equivalent that's used on Flickr Commons, for example. And there are other local and regional equivalents around the world. I hear you cry, well, what about non-commercial, NC, or no derivative, ND policies? Well, I'm afraid to say that they're not considered open for the purposes of the survey, and I think generally now in the Open GLAM field, because they're too restrictive for users. They put too many conditions on the reuse of this material, so they are outside the scope. In summary, free access, which you often hear about, is really something that you can see, but it's not open access. Open access is things that you can reuse and use freely without conditions. So this is a useful simplification. The data sources for the Open GLAM survey are as follows. So we're talking about data that GLAMs make available on their own websites, usually collections online, similar portal, and also external platforms such as Wikimedia Commons, or from aggregators like Europeana or Japan Search, and as I mentioned, Flickr Commons. And the focus of the survey is on digital surrogates of objects in the public domain, where any term of copyright for the material object has expired or actually never existed in the first place. The survey data from the beginning and still today has been kept in a growing and increasingly mature Google Sheet, a gigantic spreadsheet that really has a lot of granular detail on where the open access instances are, what kind of GLAM institution they are, what the specific licenses that are in use, and everything in the survey has a direct link to the open data source. So if you want to see the open collections, then this survey it takes you straight there through a link. The short link is underneath at the bottom of the slide here. It's a bit.ly link that takes you through to the latest survey. It's updated usually weekly, backed up daily, and it's also been archived on the Internet Archive, archive.org. The Google Sheet allows a number of quite interesting and useful visualizations of the data. So this is something I made yesterday, which gives you a general idea of the coverage of Open GLAM. The darker green means that there is sort of more instances, more examples of Open GLAM in the various countries. And you can see here that there are significant parts of the world where either Open GLAM practice has not happened, or we just haven't found it yet. And that could be true because we're finding new examples all the time. The Google Sheet also allows you to do interesting visualizations. So this is an example. It breaks down Open GLAM that we found by institution type. So galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And museums, you can see, are about 40% of what we found so far. The survey is also annotated and recorded in detail in Wikidata. So every example of OpenGLAM that we found has a specific kind of annotation in Wikidata. So if you are a Wikidatan and you're interested in doing Sparkle queries and interesting interrogations of the information, then you can do that in Wikidata. Something worth knowing, important to know, is open access scope. The survey records instances, so single examples of open access, but these can be quite small in scale and exceptions to the institution's general policy and practice. So inclusion in the survey doesn't mean that the GLAM has a universal open access policy. And the way that we express that in the data is we have open access scope. This indicates whether GLAM has released just some, or in fact, all of its eligible data on open access terms. So that's an important detail worth remembering. And here is the latest picture of that. You can see that 72% of examples are actually just some of the data, and the relative minority have released all of the data on open access terms. If you'd like to learn more about the survey, then I've written a series of articles on OpenGLAM Medium, which again are linked here and have been translated already into Spanish and into Italian also. And I'd like to thank you very much for listening. Please feel very welcome to get in touch with me today or afterwards. And yeah, I look forward to the rest of the session and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. That was very interesting. I'd like to introduce everyone to Ivy Lee now and invite her to take floor. Ivy is the head of collections, statutory functions and research at the National Library of Singapore. She works with librarians and researchers of the library to build and preserve Singapore's documentary heritage that includes legal deposit, web archiving, etc. She also works with colleagues to develop the ASEAN Digital Library, a project that aggregates and connects digitized resources of Asian national libraries so that these repositories can be accessed through a single search facility. Welcome, Ivy, and we look forward to learning from you about Asian cultural heritage.
Okay, thanks, Medhavi. Okay, let me share screen here. Okay. Okay. Right. Thank you for the introduction, Medhavi. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to be on the same platform as Heritage Lab, Europeana, and Wikimedia Indonesia to talk about ASEAN Digital Library. I come with the posture to learn from Heritage Lab, Europeana, and Wikimedia Indonesia, as actually they are more established as projects providing valuable digital content in their respective regions. So thank you, UNESCO, for the honor to share the platform with them. ASEAN stands for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and it is a regional intergovernmental organization comprising of 10 countries in Southeast Asia. It was created in 1967 and has been playing an important role in the last 50 over years in promoting economic integration among members and advancing the interest of the region as a whole. ASEAN Digital Library, or ADL for short, is a regional project supported by the ASEAN Committee on Culture and Information. National libraries in ASEAN hold a great wealth of library resources that span the spectrum of formats. These can be digitized for easy access, and much of the digitization work has already been done. What remains, however, is the effort to draw together these new national databases so that the repositories can be seamlessly searched and accessed. So this is where ADL comes in to fill the gap, or we hope to fill the gap. ADL aggregates and connects the digitized resources of ASEAN national libraries so that these repositories can be accessed through a single search facility. I'm going to play a 3 minutes video clip that briefly introduces ADL. I wonder if Ben can help me here to play the video. Okay. Going back to the slides. Okay. So thanks, Ben. The National Library of Singapore is the content aggregator for the project. We help to maintain the ADL website and link up the metadata of digitized content submitted by the ASEAN National Libraries. To kickstart the project, NLB, the National Library Board Singapore, signed an MOU with the 9 ASEAN libraries, and this was followed by a regional meeting and training session in Singapore in 2014 and 2016 for the ASEAN NL representatives to streamline the metadata standards, data extraction and submission process. So in 2017, it marked the 50th anniversary of ASEAN, and ADL was launched officially to commemorate this special occasion. With it, more than 82,000 records from the ASEAN National Libraries were unveiled at the launch. The next few slides will provide examples of the rich collection in ADL that showcases the diverse cultural heritage of Southeast Asia. So here we have from Brunei, contribution of about 150 directories, including Brunei Darussalam Authors Directory. And here's from Cambodia. Cambodia contributed about 3,500 newspaper publications, including like newspapers like their first French Cambodian company newspaper. called Le Mekong. And then subsequently, even though the company closed in 2010, the newspapers are still available for access here. And in Indonesia, if you're curious to know what Indonesia looked like in the past, here are some drawings from the 1700s. Here's one of the example of Castle Batavia, which is the resident of the highest official of the Dutch East India Company. And from Laos, we have some palm leaves manuscripts. They contributed, the National Library of Laos contributed over 12,000 rare manuscripts written on dried palm leaves. And this collection content ranges from Buddhist scriptures, folklore, and literary works and medicine. So pictured here is part of the Jataka tale. From Malaysia, we have about 1,200 works of the Malaysia's Malay manuscript collection. And these works are beautifully illustrated here in the Quran manuscripts and decorative illuminations. From Myanmar, we have some music and poetry journals and magazines. And these are a colorful collection. Picture here, I shall not attempt to pronounce the Myanmar titles, noting that we have Myanmar librarians here in our participants, right? So that's from Myanmar National Library. From the Philippines, they have contributed the official gazette. And this here is the first issue published in Spanish in 1902. And you can find actually more than 5,000 issues of the official gazette in the ASEAN Digital Library. This is from the National Library Singapore with about 26,000 materials here, a portion of which are rare books, such as the 1934 book Raffles, the founder of Singapore, and as well as some rare maps and old photographs. From Thailand, we have some European postcards. Right here, we have postcards of Kantara, also now known as El Kantara, an area west of the Suez Canal. Vietnam has contributed a lot of publications, 29,000 items and more, including 4,000 newspapers, some of which are still in print. Featured here is the Saigon, okay, shall not try to pronounce as well in case we have Vietnamese colleagues here. So what we learned from the ASEAN Digital Library, right? Visitorship to the EDL website has been encouraging, right? Even though we have not been actively promoting the website, visitorship has averaged about 15,000 per year since the launch in 2017. In addition, page views has increased to more than 250,000 in 2019, an indication that increasingly serious researchers have been accessing the website. There are some of the things that we have learned in the past 3 years. Firstly, it is important to maintain and improve the working relationship with our partners. We have managed to meet up twice in the last few years, and this ought to be continued on a regular basis after COVID-19 is over and we can all travel again. The popularity of Zoom has given us new ideas to connect with our colleagues in ASEAN online more often. Secondly, the risk appetite for open access is not high. I'm saying this more for Singapore, as I do not have data on this matter for our partners in ASEAN. Even for orphan works and websites that we have archived, my experience is that we tend to lean on the cautious side and require explicit consent from owners before we can make it accessible on open platforms. Copyright is a complicated subject matter made worse by legalese. In Singapore, the Intellectual Property Office is currently updating our Copyright Act to make it more readable for the layman, and I'm looking forward to that to provide more clarity. The National Library of Singapore has been participating in the amendments of the Copyright Act, and we have highlighted the special need of GLAMs with regards to collecting, access, and preservation. Thirdly, metadata submitted could vary from country to country and person to person. Hence, it is important to provide a simplified template that can be completed with ease. It remains a challenge currently as there is still cleanup work required, as it is something to strive towards. Finally, diversity in language and culture also has an impact on how we understand and process metadata submitted, as well as how researchers locate and interpret documents. We are considering tapping on researchers with the language capability to assist us in this area, maybe even through crowdsourcing. As ADL moves towards the next phase of its development, we plan to review the project with our partners to better understand how we can fine-tune the process and support them. We are also going to review and enhance ADL's functions while simultaneously increasing our marketing efforts to promote the usage of the website. One of the ways that we plan to do so is to continually learn from established open access projects like the Heritage Lab, Europeana, and Wikimedia Indonesia. Thank you for your attention and time.
Thank you so much for that very inspiring insights into your work, Ivy. I'm sure that our participants will have many questions for Douglas, you, and Yvonne as well. I'm just going to introduce Yvonne for the next set. Yvonne is the Yvonne is the Deputy Chair of Wikimedia Indonesia and a member of the Creative Commons Global Network. She has been volunteering for Wikimedia since 2010 and has become an advocate for open access and open license. She currently works as a project coordinator at the Goethe Institute in Jakarta. Welcome, Yvonne, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Medafi. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon from Jakarta, and it's such an honor to be here, to have the opportunity to learn from Ivy and from Douglas. And thank you to UNESCO and the organizers of this webinar for inviting me today. Let me share my presentation. So I'm given the opportunity today to share with all of you Wikimedia Indonesia's experiences in partnerships and work in GLAM sector. Especially in this case, taking the case of our attempt of preservation of literary heritage. And it all started with this machine. So this is a DIY scanner that we bought. So a little bit of an anecdote. I'm going to tell a journey that this machine has gone through to get to us. So we bought this scanner from Latvia, from Europe, and since we found out that shipping is really expensive, we try to get around it by sending the scanner from Latvia to Estonia. And there we have a colleague from Wikimedia Estonia who would go to Hong Kong for Wikimania in 2013, which is a conference for all Wikipedians and Wikimedians, and he would bring the scanner with him. And then I flew from Jakarta to Hong Kong to attend Wikimania and also to pick up the scanner. So such a long way for a scanner to go through. But when the scanner arrived, we were quite excited to assemble it. But now the question is why? Why did we do that? Why did we bought the scanner and why did we go through all of this? Well, apart from saving some money, this is what we want to solve. So at that time in 2013, we have some public domain text and manuscripts which are not yet available in digital form and not yet online. And we are also planning to partner with GLAM institutions who wanted to digitize their collections. Many of the GLAM institutions that we finally work, they doesn't have the financial means and they don't have the technical skills to start their own digitization project. While many of their collections, usually manuscripts, are in dire need of preserving. So we offer this DIY scanner along with some trainings and assistance from the Wikimedia Indonesia digitization team at the time. They offer some trainings for digitization and also to upload the collections in free license to Wikimedia Commons. So we did actually approach some more established institutions, but we found a little bit of challenges with bureaucratic barriers and etc. But we found out that with the small GLAM institutions, that they're more flexible and they're more willing to collaborate with us to preserve and digitize their collections. So here are some of the results, some highlights of the results of the digitization project. This is from our partners, one of our GLAM partners, Dewantara Kirtigriya Museum in Yogyakarta. This is a museum that keeps the collection of Ki Hajar Dewantara. He was Indonesian independence movement activist, a writer, and also a pioneer of education for Indonesians during Dutch colonial times. This project helped us scan letters that he wrote during his lifetime. We also partner because the letters he wrote are some in Bahasa Indonesia, some in Japanese, and some in Dutch. We also partner with volunteers of Wikisource to transcribe the letters into Dutch and then to translate the letters from Dutch to Indonesian. Another is Kejauhan Magazine. This is in collaboration with Yayasan Sastra Lestari, a foundation with a mission of preserving and digitizing Japanese manuscripts. And this is a bi-weekly literary magazine with short stories and poems written in Japanese scripts. We also collaborate with another literary magazine. This time it's written in Bahasa Indonesia. It is Horizon Magazine, and it was co-founded by well-respected Indonesian writers, Mokhtar Lubis and others. In West Sumatra, we joined forces with the digitization team led by Dr. Pramono in Padang. And this project leads to a digitized private collections of Ahmad Damhouri, which is a prominent writer of West Sumatra. Now, some of the GLAM institutions we partner with, like Horizon Magazine and Museum Dewantara Kirtigriya, are now are still in continuous engagement, and we form a long-term partnerships with them. And they are also now partnering with us to provide their collections as the basis for a cultural hackathon that we are organizing. We call it Ratas Budaya, or Hack Your Culture. And this is a project organized in partnership with a lot of stakeholders. There are the government, Directorate General of Culture, and there's Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Indonesian Game Association, and publisher Alex Media, and also, of course, Wikimedia Indonesia and Goethe Institute. More about this can be accessed on the website, goethe.de/ratasbudaya. We are now already opened the call to hack the cultural collections into stories, games, designs, and also there's a citizen science project. And yeah, well, it's a nice project that we have, and it's a nice collaboration with other organizations. And so what do we learn from this? I think the first and foremost point that is very important is collaboration is important for those small GLAM institutions who doesn't have the technical resource, the financial resources or the technical means. It is a collaboration is key, where collaborating with other movement or other communities, other organizations such as Wikimedia Indonesia could help in their digitization project and preservation project. And the second is take baby steps, because start with the small collections, because digitization takes a lot of effort and time. So when we approach new GLAM partners to open the collections, and when we approach them to join the cultural hackathon, many are feeling overwhelmed because they thought they need to open all of the collections at once. But it's a long process, and it's okay to open with a small number of data or collections as a start, as a first step. And the third is plan some activities using the digitized collection to better attract GLAM partners. As with the experience with a cultural hackathon, GLAM partners are more likely and more willing to open their collections when they know we're going to make something out of that, when they know that the output is direct engagement with audiences. And also from our other project, when we digitized the manuscripts and some books, we also organized some Wikisource competitions with volunteers. So they know that it's a mutual collaboration. They're just not opening it, but the volunteers could contribute something, whether transcribing or turning the data into something. So yeah, that's my short presentation. I'm looking forward to the question and answer sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivonne. It's great to know how Wikimedia can support GLAM institutions in the region and the kind of collaborations and the possibilities around it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just want to remind everyone that you will find the presentations and relevant links in the chat section, and you can continue to leave your questions in the Q&A section. We will take it up, but we have a short rapid fire round that's coming up. And I'm particularly excited about this because preparing for the rapid fire helped me see some of the interesting projects that are going on around the world, the field of Open GLAM. So we're going to start. How this works is that each speaker gets 1 minute to answer 5 questions that we're going to throw at them. They've already somehow made their choices, so we'll play them on the screen for you, but they will describe their choices in the 1 minute that we have. So please stay tuned, and after the rapid fire, we'll take up your questions as well. So I'm going to start. Perhaps we start with Douglas. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Let's
Okay.
go.
Okay. So I'm going to open the presentation and go with your time starts now. A project that you highly recommend.
Yeah, so I'm a unashamed, massive fanboy of the Art Institute of Chicago. I think apart from their CC0 open access policy, I love the way that they present their collections and also share a lot of editorial different perspectives on those collections. So anyone that's involved in making collections online, or actually just a user who wants to find and reuse an amazing archive of material, then please check it out. It's a great resource. Towards the National Collection is something which is recently getting underway in the UK, and this is a multi-year project that will bring together a variety of UK-based GLAM collections. So that's kind of exciting that the UK may have a broader collaborative aggregation presence. Japan Search came out of beta a few months ago. Maybe there's some people involved in this session. I think it's a really excellent start, and it's great that Japan now has a national aggregator who can present and serve open access collections. Something I learned from is the Welcome Collection. My work is a lot of editorial content, marketing and development, so the way that they present stories is great, so please check out their website. Yeah, and a classic open access myth is that we'll lose control of our collections. I think if you've got your collections online in any form, then you've basically lost control already. You're going to find them all over the web. So it's a slightly kind of false position to take, and better to be open access and be on the front foot and to be more proactive in this area. So thanks.
That was just under a minute. Thank you so much, Douglas, for sharing your collection.
You're welcome.
Fascinating. Yeah. Ivy, can we have you up next for this, for the rapid fire?
Yeah,
sure. Are you ready? So
okay.
I'll begin with the 5 questions. Do share what you found interesting about the projects also while making your selection, while describing your selection.
Right. So a project that I highly recommend, right, is Europeana. The ASEAN Digital Library actually drew a lot of inspiration from Europeana project. It's much more established. And I like how Europeana actually brings together the rich cultural heritage of Europe, all within one accessible portal. To enable such an organized access to a large collection must have taken much negotiation, thought, and planning that we don't really see while we are enjoying the collection and materials online. Right. Next, the project that has a lot of room to grow, I'd say definitely the ASEAN Digital Library. It's only 3 years old and there's a lot to improve. I've shared in my presentation, actually the many things that we can improve on. Right. A project that I wish more people knew about is, sorry, but I gotta say this, the ASEAN Digital Library again, perhaps, because I think Southeast Asia is really an amazing and culturally diverse region where its cultural heritage is not yet widely accessible to the world within one convenient portal. So yeah, I mean, it would be really nice to be able to see more of our rich cultural heritage being showcased to the world. A project that I would like to learn from, I'd say that my response would be the same as the number one, which is Europeana. And I'd also like to add that recently I visited the Heritage Lab founded by Midavi, and I'm most impressed by the website design and the thought and thinking that goes behind the project. Okay, and the myth, open access myth that I like to debunk. Yes, I share the same view as Douglas. Actually, I think it's also a concern for most institutions when we think about open access, especially if our key performance indicators is tied to like physical visitorship, reservations to view items, or ticketed access. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. That was great. Thank you so much. Ivonne, are we ready?
Yes.
Should I go?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Go ahead. Okay, so a project that I highly recommend. I wish I can have more than one answer, but I pick Coding Da Vinci and from Germany. I love what comes out of this culture hackathon, and I was um, so lucky to have experienced this once. And there are many creative and funny projects that make use of cultural collections and really bringing the cultural collections into another level. So there is a high level of creativity there. So I suggest that you go and see all the cool projects that they have been made. And a project that has a lot of room to grow. So we have this project Wiki Cinta Budaya or Wiki Loves Culture. I think this is a great use of crowdsourcing, a great way to harness the power of crowd in collecting culture archives in the forms of photographs. Especially in Indonesia, we are such a vast country with a very diverse culture. But I think there's also a lot of room to grow. We need to explore more into other mediums such as video or audio archives. And I think there's also plenty of opportunities to foster collaboration to link this archive and dig a bit more about the story behind the culture, behind the cultural artifact that was photographed. And a project that I wish more people knew about is Irama Nusantara. This is a community initiative in archiving and digitizing popular music in Indonesia from the 1910s and to 1980s. I think they done a very important and cool job. They put all of the digitized music on their website, so you can go back in time and listen to what kind of music was popular in Indonesia in 1910s, etc. It's I really love that. And a project that I would like to learn from, I've discovered the Heritage Lab by Medavi, and I agree. I look at the website; it's a very interesting and cool website with a lot of activities and a lot of ideas for museums. And I feel like this project seems to never run out of ideas of fun and interesting activities, digital activities to connect with museums, collections. And a myth that I would like to debunk. If we make our collections available for use, people will misuse them. So I get this a lot. It's a lot of a common fear within the institutions. I get asked a lot, how can we guarantee that when we open the collections, there will be no one who misuse them? Well, we cannot guarantee that, and nobody can guarantee that, but we can. I think it's not fully true, because take the example of Wikipedia. It works in practice, but not in theory, because on paper everyone can edit. It's a nightmare, but it turns out that more people want to do good with it instead of harm. So I think if we open collections, there will be a lot of creativities that can get out of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ivy and Ivone, for the shout out to the Heritage Lab. It's really kind of you. Especially, I think the myths are very interesting to hear from you, the debunking of these myths, because these are very common questions that we come across in our work. Before we start addressing all the questions, I have a question for each one of you, and a common question that all of you can feel free to answer. I'm going to start with the question that is open to any of you. Anybody can answer, or each one of you can answer. Take it how you will. So the first question is, how do you think open access aligns with the mission of memory and cultural heritage institutions to preserve and disseminate information and knowledge? What is the contribution that digital collections can bring to the creative economy or the larger society? Please just unmute yourself if you want to take the question and address it. Any of you, Douglas, Ivone, Ivy, any of you want to address that?
Yeah, I'm happy to try. It's a great question, Madhavi, and I'll try and be brief. I think what we're seeing now in the Open GLAM field, particularly in the last 5-10 years, is not just the growth of Open GLAM, the increasing adoption of open access policies for public domain, digitized collections, but the realization that that policy is part of actually being a 21st century GLAM institution, that open access is part of an attitude and a philosophy really for museums that moves away from the control instincts that maybe we saw more in the 20th century, where whether it's the physical collections or the digitized objects are something that should be kind of controlled and locked down. And I think we saw that in the myths a second ago about, worrying about reuse. And I've always felt that when it comes to open access and copyright, copyright isn't and never has been like a good mechanism for preventing reuse, because bad actors, who thankfully are in the very, very small minority, will do bad things regardless of copyright. They really don't care about it. So it's much smarter to see open access as something which you are positive, that you really own as an institution. And then you can see it actioned in all kinds of different areas, whether it's working with creatives, remixers, like we saw the Coding Da Vinci. You can work with educational materials and development. Open access can be an expression of your mission in so many different areas that you're involved in. So that's my take on it. Thanks.
That's very interesting that you say that, because I think that we have to take that chance and sort of promote the positivity. Ivone, do you want to add to that, perhaps?
Yeah, so about open access and knowledge dissemination, I think open access is it's knowledge dissemination on steroids. This is the time where we can spread information in such an unprecedented speed and very relatively low cost. But I think open access also helps memory and cultural heritage institutions in reaching new audiences by transgressing borders. So me in Jakarta can access the collection in British Library, for example, and we're not bound by physical borders anymore. Although we're still bound by language barriers and digital divide, but I think it's a great thing where how the collections can travel and how it can reach new people. And for its impact on the creative economy, I think with open access, they can have more accessible, more access to a lot of great arts, great cultural collections and artifact. And I think it stimulates the creative economy, because personally I think our art is as good as our references, and it will be great if artists could have access to great references and can be inspired or even build upon it, and hopefully it would snowball and lead to even better art. Yeah, so yeah, digital collections, I think make more art accessible to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think looking at projects like the Coding Da Vinci project that you also mentioned in your presentation, you never know what people can really do with that, what kind of apps they can create, and the kind of new knowledge that they can end up creating. So I think open access really contributes to that as well. Ivy, would you want to add to this as well?
Yeah, I think GLAM, the GLAM industry has traditionally been a source of inspiration for a lot of people, the general public, the researchers, the artists, etc., to do some kind of derivative products, yeah, to because they draw inspiration from the GLAM industry, what we showcase. And I think the pandemic actually helps us to really put this importance into greater perspective. Now that we know that actually digital access is more critical and even more important. Now we can't travel. We probably have to rely on working from home and accessing things within our own country. But I think it would really help in open access if we can collectively look at how we can simplify the legalese that is involved in using copyright, or how people can use materials to do some kind of a reproduction, or to use it to do a derivative product. Because if we can make it clearer and simpler for the layman, I think that would really help in promoting the use. Thank you.
It's very true and very important to make it easier for lay people to understand and sort of open GLAM institutions to them as well. My first question in the series is for Douglas. Douglas, how have you seen in the survey? I mean, what are the different kind of approaches to open access that you have noticed in the survey, in terms of the platforms, the definitions? What are these different kind of approaches? If you could just elaborate on that.
Sure, happy to. So just to pick up on Ivy's comment now, that what we've seen is that the value of standardization of the legal tools around open access, particularly rights statements and Creative Commons, are incredibly valuable, because when you, as a reuser or as a citizen, you see CC0 or CC BY, and if you're familiar with those, then you have an instant understanding of what that actually means. And as a person who's researched a museum terms and conditions a lot, I've had the misfortune of reading 4,000-word policies that go a very long way to describe non-open policies. And that kind of international standardization, which, whether it's in Indonesia or it's in Belgium, that shared legal terminology and references is very, very powerful. And the survey had really expressed that how much these legal tools have been taken up right across the world. So that's the first thing. In terms of platforms of open data, one of the things which has really powered the growth of examples in the survey, so going from 30 back in 2018 to 858 this morning, is we've been able to harvest open data examples using aggregators. So I know I would say that because I work for Europeana, but I think aggregators have a really useful role actually in enabling anyone who wants open access content to, whether through APIs or through the portals, to source, find and reuse things. whether it's DPLA or it's Europeana or the German Digital Library or Japan Search, there's many aggregators. They play an important part, particularly in surfacing the smaller institutions. So let's say an Austrian regional library, which may not even have a kind of immediate collections interface. It submits its data through a local aggregator and then it's republished elsewhere. And what's true there is also true, of course, of Wikimedia Commons, where the many GLAM wiki projects over recent years have been uploaded and documented there. So you have a kind of one-stop shop there to access an amazing range and variety of open access material, which I think has a utility that is really important and saves you visiting 3,000 different websites. If you can go to one place and access and see what's there, then yeah, that's a big plus. Thank you.
Glad you mentioned that, because I think it's been very difficult sometimes for institutions to sign those MOUs with aggregators also. So I'm glad that you addressed the important role of aggregators in the process, in fact. We also have another question for you from amidst our participants. Rugares mentioned that, I noticed in your global view, no data in some continents. Have you reached out to any GLAMs as yet, or it's still a work in progress?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for that. So the survey method, which I touched upon briefly in that talk, was it's very much based on desk research. So it's Andrea and I and the amazing Open GLAM community, many of whom are in this session, informing each other about things that they found, open access examples which they sourced, and it's led by sort of desk or online research. What we haven't done is email or reach out to the thousands or hundreds of museums and say, hey, can you tell us about your open access policy? Because I know from other experience that approach is very successful, and frankly, who needs another survey in their life? So what we tend to do is approach the survey methods more organically. Now, as I showed, I think in a map, there are significant continents and countries around the world where we haven't yet found open access. Now, that doesn't mean it's not there. We just haven't become aware of it. The Open GLAM community hasn't said, hey, look, you should check this out because I think it should be in the survey. But I'm hoping that that will happen. And even in recent weeks, we've added several new countries to the survey. So it's not the final picture. It's very much a growing picture. And everyone who's in this call is totally welcome to reach out to Andrea and I and let us know if you found something we haven't got. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. My next question is for Ivonne. Ivonne, how do you see Wikimedia platforms being a driver for open access? You already illustrated a lot of that in your presentation, I know. But for example, Wikimedia Commons only allows for freely licensed content. How does this shape the collaborations that you have with GLAM institutions?
I think Wikimedia movement right now is at the point where we have gained a little bit of power to negotiate in institutional levels for open access and for freely licensed content. Looking back at the early years of Wikipedia, knowledge and cultural institutions consider Wikipedia to be unreliable and have a big skepticism out of it. But now more and more we are gaining trust and we are collaborating with those institutions at an equal level. And now Wikimedia has its role in the knowledge ecosystem. And what this shown is volunteer-driven projects could amount to something and could have an important role in the whole knowledge ecosystem. And it has gained critical advantage. And maybe, in terms of collaborations with GLAM institutions, it has become an important negotiation point. So when we are negotiating, we told them that if you like your collections to be accessible to thousands of people accessing Wikipedia or Wikimedia Commons, you have to use free license, you have to use Creative Commons attribution share alike. Well, it's not foolproof for now, but it has its weight. So with the visibility that the Wikimedia project offers, we are making that to negotiate for a more open access policy for GLAM institutions. Yeah.
Right. There's a question actually related to this that Mohammed has asked. Mohammed says that my impression for Wikimedia Indonesia's work is more or less in collecting and digitizing based on chance. I wonder how you structured your information and collections. He further asks if there are any obstacles related to open access policy or the slowness of digitization of documents. Can you give examples of that? Can the community be involved in that program, the ADL program?
Yeah, so for Wikimedia Indonesia's work, we are structuring all of the digitized collections and informations are on Wikimedia Commons, and we are making use of this platform. Like Douglas said, it's a one-stop platform where you can find all the culture openly licensed collections there, and all of the our partners. We always push for the collections to be uploaded there, so it could reach more people, and it could have more visibility, especially when it's for smaller institutions where they don't even have a website. It could be an advantage for them to have a more online presence through Wikimedia Commons platform. And for obstacles regarding the open access policy, yeah, we have found some challenges and some obstacles because for some institutions, they have not yet adopted an open access policy, and but for some, they are willing to negotiate. For example, we had a collaboration or a partnership with the Bank Indonesia Museum, Indonesian Bank Museum, and they have said like these collections are out of the question. We cannot make it open access, and we're fine with it. But they can find another collections which are available and which are available for open access, and we're trying to negotiate some of these collections, and yeah, the volunteers can also contribute to it. As a matter of fact, we, for this digitization program, we are helped a lot by volunteers from the Wikipedia community and Wikimedia communities to help with the technicalities of scanning, of uploading the collections to the Wikimedia platforms, and to have editathons for transcriptions or put it on Wikipedia. And we are very thankful for the volunteer communities that help with this collaboration with GLAMs.
Thank you, Yvonne, for elaborating on that. There are a couple of other questions for you, but maybe I'll come back to those. And in the meanwhile, maybe perhaps you could look at those questions as well in the Q&A section. My question to you, Ivy, would be about the strategic vision of the ASEAN Digital Library. As an aggregator, what are the kind of cooperations and how do these cooperations with institutions level up the knowledge and help with capacity building?
Okay, like shared earlier, that actually the digitization progress and work in the ASEAN region is also quite diverse. So some countries are a little bit more advanced in doing the digitization works, and some are not. And some countries also have not provided a portal yet to provide access to their digitized content. So that is one of the difficulty for us in terms of like providing open access. And frankly, when we were working on this project, we were really focusing on helping the ASEAN national libraries together to select and scan, digitize, and share what we have, and we were not really focusing on open access, like how the materials can be reused by other people freely. So a lot of the attention was doing that, and to circumvent the copyright issue, a lot of countries, because of the history that they do have a lot of rare materials that no longer have copyright restrictions, and they're willing to digitize it and share it with the rest of the world. So that is currently the situation. But moving forward, we are really looking at how to up the level a little bit more by perhaps to have a baseline common understanding of open access, and like what Douglas shared, using the international standard of copyright CC, and so that we can use and provide more of our content in the ASEAN Digital Library and encourage reuse. Hope that answers the question.
Yes. Douglas, is there something you wanted to add to this? Sorry, I misread. In fact, I misread another question from Mohammed. I think it was from for the ASEAN Digital Library, Ivy. He mentions that apart from language problems, are there any obstacles related to the open access policy or the slowness digitization of documents for each country? Can you give an example of that? And especially for ADL, can community involve that program? I'm really sorry, Mohammed, that I misread the question. It came in a list and there were two similar names. So
yeah, thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, thanks, Mohammed, for the question. Maybe I think part of what you asked have been answered in my previous sharing. When I said that actually the standard of digitization and speed of digitization is also varies from country to country. To give a specific example, this is not really updated information because, but the last time I checked, Brunei probably doesn't have a portal to where they provide access to their digitized content. So it is something that we can look into how we can maybe to streamline so that all the national libraries will be able to provide direct access to their digitized content.
right. If anyone has any questions, please keep adding them and submitting them to the Q&A section so we can keep coming back. If I may, Yvonne, can I come back to a question that has been directed at you? The question is, I think you've already answered that in the chat. But the question was around what events gained the most traction when GLAMs, which GLAMs inspired them to share open collections. If I can just probably have you to just share what have been these events that inspired GLAMs to share collections.
Yeah, so we're still experimenting with different types of events, but in the past we've done some editathons and also wiki-related contests to crowdsource for digitized manuscripts. But we are now also looking to organize our cultural hackathons, and we received quite a positive responses, and I think from the GLAM institutions, they are really interested in joining and in seeing what their collections can become, and how would it transform, how would it be when the creative communities, the artists, designers transform their collections. Yeah, I think that's also a good event that could attract GLAM partners.
I'm sure. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the Europeana Gift It Up competition,
yeah,
and share the experience that in India, we actually got one museum to open up some of their collections and take those baby steps like you mentioned in your presentation through a Gift It Up event. So Douglas, thank you, and you and Europeana for such a brilliant event. I think it interested everybody immediately. We're just looking at some other questions from participants, and I mean, I'm sort of out of my questions, but I do have some more. If anyone would like to perhaps add their questions, speakers, if you have questions for each other, that would be an excellent opportunity to ask each other any questions.
Maybe I have a question since I said I come here with the posture of learning. Yeah, I'd like to ask Douglas, at which point after you have, or rather after Europeana has started, do they decide that open access is important enough that they want to focus on this aspect of the portal and the collection? I like to learn how we can do the same and plan ahead for that.
Yeah, thank you, Ivy. It's a really good question. I think last year Europeana celebrated its 10th birthday. So if anyone feels like sending cake to our office or maybe my house, then it's not too late. But it was quite important early on that Europeana made a very visible and strong stance around the public domain and its value, as we've talked a lot about today. So back in 2012, we had something called the Public Domain Charter, where we essentially said things which are in the public domain physically, when they're digitized, should really, as much as possible within different legal environments, remain in the public domain as digital objects. So open access and not just the policy, but the real value of that remains and has been crucial to Europeana from the beginning. I think what we often see at Europeana and more widely in Open GLAM is that those baby steps that Madhavi nicely sketched are actually really reasonable and a great way to get started. So for institutions who do have those worries about misuse, losing control, maybe lacking the ability to monetize and generate revenue from collections, starting small, whether it's in a hackathon or something like GIF It Up or many different kind of small projects, GLAM Wiki, can be a great way to get started. To dip your toe in the water before you look to go further. You can evaluate, see how it went, what did you learn, and then develop and reflect from there. And something that we've also noticed over the past 10 years in Open GLAM is that you see institutions who start with a relatively restricted Creative Commons license, maybe with non-commercial or no derivative flavors. Then maybe they move to CC BY or CC BY SA on the path to a really liberal legal tool like CC0 or the public domain mark. So that path towards openness in terms of scale and in terms of licensing policy, I think is valuable and is a good way to move forward, rather than taking the leap into the unknown, which of course can be scary.
I do have a question, actually, just to follow up on this entire conversation that we've had around open access. How do you sort of advocate the use of open access amidst the public? Like, what are the kind of outreach strategies that Europeana, the Asian Digital Library, or Wikimedia has sort of used to enable people to use these collections, or sort of tell them that these materials are now under open access? Are there some best practices there that you would recommend? Douglas?
Yeah, this is a personal reflection rather than a Europeana reflection. I think what's really important is that when material becomes openly accessible on the web, that if you do it in the right way, that you're using platforms, for example, the Wikimedia projects, where there is immediate traction with open content, then people will find it. If you do it open access in the right way online, your material will be found. Google image search, for example, is a really important kind of mechanism for people to do that. So I think audiences will, to a great extent, find your material themselves. And that's actually part of the opportunity, is that when you make content openly available on the web, there'll be all kinds of interesting, unexpected, creative reuses that happen. And you don't necessarily need to know about it, and that's fine. That's part of the kind of philosophical change that the institution needs to take. So whilst I think it's great that some of the institutions represented here, have contests, have events, have hackathons, do online programming, that's really important to express themselves. I do also think that when you put material on the web openly, it will be found, and that's actually where most of the traction and the magic happens.
It's very interesting to know there. Again, Ivan, would you want to add to that?
Yeah. Oh, regarding open access, I immediately go back to thinking about the cultural hackathon, or just an editathon, or any online contest that I think it's a good way to raise the awareness of this open access, and also to to encourage people to use these open access materials, like we've already discussed how from Give It Up or Coding Da Vinci, we've always surprised of what the result is, where people want to express themselves, and by using this cultural, I think the GLAM institutions are also gaining some benefits as well. They are being known. Previously, when especially when the small institution doesn't have any like online presence, and they're now known and being used and being mentioned, and we can I think they're getting more awareness, and I think it's the fun and good way for as a strategy for outreach and for encouraging people to use open access materials.
Right. Ivy, are there any experiences you would like to share with regard to outreach?
Yeah, very not that much for us, but actually with the pandemic, it has given us some ideas that we used to keep planning for physical meeting and meetings through Consal, which is like Southeast Asia libraries meeting every few years. But with the pandemic and the prevalent use of Zoom and online meetings, I'm thinking that this kind of outreach and webinars can be done online now, which is so convenient nowadays. Actually, Midavi, I wonder whether you'd like to talk about your Heritage Lab project, which is also an excellent project to share for open access.
Thank you, Ivy. Actually, I could just sort of take in from the public outreach part of it, because the Heritage Lab actually started as an initiative, as a response to the fact that we don't have access to cultural heritage. And it's a very visitor-led idea, because I started it not as someone from the cultural sector. I mean, of course, I've worked with the cultural sector for long enough, but I really thought that it was time that we started addressing some of the questions that visitors have. And these were largely around content. And we ran a survey initially to just understand what visitors wanted out of the museums. Was it better interiors? Was it access to online collections and stories? What was it that they really expected out of the institutions? So everything that you see has been largely a response to everything that people wanted. And even today, I think that's the idea, that yes, it is to bridge the conversation between what museums want to share and what people want to know. And we try to do those through interesting events, campaigns, all of that. But there is a lot of advocacy involved, sharing with museums as to about open access, so that how it could sort of just help their physical visitors to come in. The more activity online would sort of translate to more physical visits as well. Metrics, because we haven't looked at metrics in a really long time. But I would say that a big learning for me has been to be outside the social media bubble. If you would notice, that when you share content on your Facebook or Twitter, wherever, we always end up interacting with the same set of people. Also, because the algorithm of these networks is such that they will just show you feed from people who you've been interacting with. So a good experience for us was to, for me personally also, was to log into forums like Quora and Reddit, to hear people, to just listen to people, no matter what their views were. Some were views that really surprised me, but that is what sort of drove what we've created. Maybe we will have an opportunity to talk about these exchanges. And I agree with you when you say that Asian cultural heritage is so vast and varied, and we've really not had enough platforms covering that. But with Japan Search, that Douglas also spoke about, I'm very excited to see these, and your platform, of course, to come up. I have a question for all of you, and it sort of leads from here that what is the kind of role? I will address the Q&A that is coming up also. We have two questions waiting, so I just want to share that with the audience that's listening right now. I am going to take those questions up, but I just want to take a brief moment to ask, what is the role that public policy has played in supporting open access in your communities? I know in Indonesia there is a law that for the advancement of culture, UNESCO recommendation, there's a recommendation by UNESCO that promotes open access to culture and memory. And in Europe, there's the European Commission, which has recommendations that were fundamental for Europeana also. But I'm curious to know from you, Ivy, and all of you actually, that what is the role public policy has played?
Right. I can only speak for Singapore and not for ASEAN as a whole. For Singapore, we take a lot from the general directive of direction of the how the whole society perceive and reception towards say copyright and use of materials. I'd say that we generally embrace open access. We want to support and create, support the use of information and resources so that more knowledge can be created from there. But it's within the remit of what the copyright law allows us to, which is why I mentioned earlier that Singapore is going through copyright law review. And this has been going on for quite a couple of years. The intention is to simplify the legalese, to make it more understandable so that people have the more courage to use materials. And also at the same time, it's also to allow the GLAM sector to have some kind of a fair use so that we can be allowed to use materials, provide access to materials without having to go through a lot of cumbersome permission seeking through rights ownership. So sometimes we'll agree with what was shared earlier by various speakers that baby steps is required, and some of the baby steps is possibly if you can't go full open access, then partial open access is also an option to consider. Hope that helps. Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. Ivonne, Douglas, would you want to share your views on how public policies helped?
Yeah, I think this is very, very important for public policy, at least in Indonesia. For quite some time, we've considered that the government has not paid enough attention to the preservation and documentation of cultural heritage. Therefore, with the new laws of advancement of culture, it's very great news for those working in the cultural sectors. And so previously, most of the works are done by community archiving and privately funded GLAM institutions where they are struggling with funding and resources. Now we have hopes with this law because I think it will set the priority and resources and infrastructure that only the government could provide for all these cultural institutions in many areas, in local and remote areas in Indonesia. So yeah, well, many of the government funding bodies are now focusing on the local culture and local knowledge projects. So yeah, we really hope that I think this is a good change and a big change, and it's still required a lot of work to do, but it's moving to the right direction, I guess.
That's great to know that it's moving in the right direction at least. Douglas?
Yeah, just to briefly build on those comments that, particularly from a European perspective, we have the directive on copyright in the single market. It's in its implementation phase in the member states at the moment, and I think it has promise and positive aspects to it. But as always with this area, it's incredibly complex and actually difficult, I think, for institutions and users to navigate, because there are neighboring rights within different European countries. There's not always harmony there. So I think it is really important that policymakers, whether in the EU or the national governments, do set the scene, do set the direction of travel that institutions and also users, citizens can follow and benefit from. But it can be a slow-moving and very complex undertaking, and there are a lot of different actors. So whether it's publishers, rights managing societies, collecting societies, they have a very different perspective on some of these issues than maybe some of us may have, more from a public institution perspective. So it's always fiercely contested and argued over.
Absolutely. And though it's not policy related, but I'm also looking at this interesting trend that's growing in the Western world, where donors to cultural institutions are sort of specifying that open access has to be a condition for them to now sort of fund the institutions. So I think that's also an interesting way that there is motivation for open access within institutions if their donors and funders sort of put that condition. It's not related to public policy, but I'm going to just take Helen's question. Maybe it could be related. If and this is directed towards you, Douglas. If Brexit will affect Europeana?
Ooh, that was unexpected. Great question, though. We have a large number of UK institutions who are part of Europeana, and Europeana publishes content and has excellent partners in our network who are beyond the European Union. We have data from outside of the European Union, now including the UK. So I'm personally very optimistic that our strong relationships will continue and that we can continue working with and supporting institutions in the UK post-Brexit. So thanks for that question.
Thank you for answering that question. We do have two more questions that are waiting. They're not specified if they're targeted towards anybody, so any of you can sort of volunteer to answer these questions. Yoko Asaigo asks, how do you share your archive among other institutions for the same purpose of sharing human knowledge? Okay, Douglas?
I can answer this one. I think what we see increasingly is a kind of a multi-channel publishing approach to data, open data included. And you have the opportunity, I think, with open data, when it's organized, to actually present it and share it where the users are, rather than where you think they should be, maybe on your website. So now you have many different platforms, whether could be still Flickr Commons, could be Wikimedia. You have relatively new platforms like Unsplash, where the traction with open content is absolutely incredible, and that really demonstrates the user's appetite for open material that they want to freely reuse. So I think, echoing my earlier comment about a 20-foot 21st century GLAM institution very much considers this sharing of data, putting your collections globally in all kinds of different places that are not your website, so that you can reach more people and develop more traction with them. And I think that's part of the excitement of this opportunity.
I think that's incredible, because Unsplash, Wikimedia, that's the question that even we faced when we participated in Give It Up and opened up 13 artworks. That is there one platform that we need to put this on, or are there numerous platforms, and what are the pros and cons of putting them on multiple platforms? And the idea that emerged was that yes, we put it in as many places as we can. So that's great that you mentioned this. Another question is about budgets. So Nasir asks that I have a resource person to digitize the contents and talked to a small institutes, and they agreed initially, but it's expensive to engage the resources. Can you please talk about or give an idea about getting funds to continue the project? As institutes are small, they do not have a budget, but they do have a resource person to digitize the content. So any advice for Nasir on funding availabilities? I want, did you have something to say there?
No, well, that's a tough one, budget question, but I don't have any. What I can think of is, I think this is where collaboration is important, right? Where you can have, you can have, connecting with other partners who can maybe share uh, some some of the costs, and maybe where they have other. Where they have their experience and expertise in some areas where you can collaborate and make use of that. For example, if you don't have resources for setting up website, you can help make use of this of other platforms, open access platforms. Um, yeah, I think that's also what we can do. But in terms of where to find funding, I cannot give any advice right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivonne. Ivy, Douglas, any advice on funding? This is I'm not too sure on it myself. So
Yeah, it's a really tough one to answer because it's so locally specific. It depends. Your region, your city, your country was going to have often very, very different conditions around it. So sorry, I can't answer that one more helpfully.
okay. There are no other questions from participants, and I think we've done without coffee for a very long time now. So I'm going to conclude this session for today by thanking all of you. First, our participants, of course, who showed up, and it's really encouraging to hear all the questions from all of you. But also Douglas, Ivy, Ivonne, for your wonderful presentations and your engagement. Thank you so much for joining. To all our participants, the next session is going to be even more interesting because it's a workshop, but it will take place at a different time. It's at 11 o'clock in the morning, GMT +7 Bangkok time. The information is in the chat box that Yufan has just shared with everyone. There's also a link to all the previous recordings. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And yes, okay. Thank you so much, everyone, and look forward to the next one.